Greetings. In this video, I'm going to discuss the components of sloped roofing and how to do quantity takeoffs for them. Slope roofing is the alternative to flat roofs. So slope roofs, this is a slope roof system that we see here. Most residential houses have sloped roofs, as do other low-rise buildings. So shingles, so the whole purpose of the roof system, and there are numerous components to it, is to shed water, of course, and protect the house. So we have our roofing shingles, the field of roof system. So the field kind of refers to an interior space as opposed to the perimeter. So sometimes you could say in the field for a piece of drywall. If you're putting screws in the field, that means the screws are being placed in the middle of the drywall rather than at the perimeter. That's what we typically mean when we say field. The ridge of the roof is where the ridge beam or the the ridge beam is up at the top. That's the very tip top. Flashing, metal flashing occurs, and we'll take a closer look at that whenever something penetrates the roof, such as a chimney or a vent pipe. Vent pipes come with boots. They kind of have a built-in flashing. This is a hip roof, so when we turn the corner, there's a roof on all four sides, as opposed to this being a gable without fascia. So the fascia is where the gutter occurs. So a hip roof would have gutters on all sides, as opposed to a gable roof where we just had a continuation of the wall here. So fascias support gutters. Gutters drain water to the downspouts. Rafter and underlayment. So this is a little messy, these arrows. So underneath the shingles, we have the underlayment, and we'll take a closer look at that as well. That would be in gray. Then underneath the underlayment, we have the sheathing, which is this in white, and then the rafters below. More gutters. So the opposite kind of a hip is a valley, and we'll take a closer look at those as well. The rake is kind of the partner to the fascia, but that is where there are not gutters. So this is a gable end here. So that's what I was referring to being over here. If the wall continued up, that would be a gable end. So this is a gable end here. And that's where the rake lives, as opposed to the fascia that supports the gutter. Soffit is the underside of the rake or the fascia, the horizontal piece underneath. There's the gable. Drip edge is, again, a metal flashing that runs at the perimeter here. And there's also drip edge down below the gutter. We'll see more details of those as well. Okay, that looks like most of that roof system. Okay, so roofs have pitches and rafter runs, and this is needed in order to calculate the distance of the actual roof. That is typically does not show up in architectural drawings. So the rafter, here's our rafter, has an overhang, and this is the run. The horizontal distance is called the run of the rafter. That's the dimension that you would get on architectural plans, and I'll walk through an example later of how to calculate this. But with that rafter run, so that is the run, and this is the rise, and that's what we see here. So typically the run is 12 inches. So a roof pitch is typically described as 12-12, 11-12, 10-12, and that's because the horizontal run is always referred to as 12 inches. So if we run over 12 inches here, and then the rise tells us how far we rise. So if it's 12-12, we end up with a 45-degree roof. If it's 6-12, we end up with a 26.5% degree roof, and so on. So again, but this is the actual. So when you're actually determining how many shingles are needed, you have to know the actual length of the rafter. And again, that's not typically given to you. But we'll work through an example as to how to come up with that. Okay, so that is basically everything on this slide. All right, so roofing falls into the CSI division of thermal and moisture protection. kind of with siding and everything, again, that on the exterior envelope helps protect the roof. So we have the roof shingles at the very top, which are not depicted here. Below them is the roofing felt, or the underlayment, so felt, paper, or ice and snow barrier. So ice and snow barrier is a very heavy duty, and I think we'll see an image of it shortly. It sticks down, and it typically goes down at the bottom, because if gutters filled with ice, and that ice is called an ice dam, and then that water and ice make their way up into the roof right at this location, it's very damaging, and that's not uncommon, unfortunately. So often the bottom layer, horizontal run here, of underlayment will be a very heavy duty peel and stick ice and snow barrier down here at the bottom, and I think we'll see an image of that. And then if you're not in a snow prone area, however, you wouldn't need that, and then you could just use felt paper, which comes in different pounds, different weights. Flashing at perimeter and penetration. So here we don't see any penetrations in this roof, but we see flashing or drip edge coming down the rake side and along the fascia as well in gray. That's the flashing. Shingle starters, we'll see that. So here it appears we could kind of see that it looks like the underneath, again, to kind of protect this area and this edge, because it's very vulnerable. Again, wind could also grab these shingle edges and tear them up. So the first course is often doubled, or you purchase a starter shingle. And we'll see examples of that as well. Nails, of course, and for both shingles and underlayment, and a ridge vent, which we don't see here. We'll see it elsewhere, though. So another review of the components. Whoops. One more visual on that. So we have our underlayment. Here we could see our starter strip or starter shingle, 12-inch wide roll roofing, or shingles with the tabs cut off is what is often used here. There's our metal drip edge, nails above the cutouts, and we'll look at that more closely as well. And the head lap of the shingles. So again, it's kind of like fish scales, which are here to shed water, and roughly about half of the shingle actually overlaps. All right, here's the starter strip being installed. So again, withstand wind, preventing the lifting of the most vulnerable shingles is the order of that. In order to qualify for the highest wind rating from many manufacturers, the use of a real dedicated starter is a requirement. So sometimes another option that's referred to here is just cutting the tabs off of. So if we take this shingle here and we cut these 3 tabs off, a lot of roofers will use the remaining piece as the shingle, as a starter, but that could void the warranty. Often manufacturers want you buying their starter shingles, which I'm sure come at a premium. Here is a valley detail, very important. So this is one location, again, a vulnerable area. So often either the tar paper or a self-adhesive snow and wind, snow and rain would be adhered in the valley. And then here we see how the tar paper underlayment completely overlaps going in each directions, and also the shingles will be made to bend and overlap there. And here we could see 2 examples. A different way to do it, more costly but much more effective, is to put a metal valley strip in there. And as shingles get old and brittle, again, a vulnerable area for damage. So, while shingles will probably lay down nicely in here at first when they're brand new, in time, again, they get old, they get brittle, and this is what you could probably expect to have happen. So this is a very nice detail. Obviously costs more, but it's good looking, and it will last much longer. Penetrations and flashing boots. So here's a penetration. So we have all different sorts, from furnaces need to exhaust air, of course, as well as bathroom vents, attic fans, And plumbing stacks, of course, also need to vent. So that is the numerous reasons why we have penetrations coming through the roof. Again, a vulnerable area that we need to take great care with. And most of these boots for these penetrations, again, have this kind of flashing built into it, and it needs to just tuck under the shingles, again, to shed water, kind of like fish scales. Flashing at the head wall. So when a roof comes up and hits a wall, that's referred to as a head wall. There's our roof sheathing, underlayment, and shingles, and here's the flashing right there. And counter flashing as well. So two pieces of flashing and counter flashing. So the flashing follows the wall and roof, as you can see, number 4, and then number 3 is the counter flashing that comes and protects this vulnerable area, tucks up underneath the siding then. Okay. And so here's the head wall. So the roof is coming up in this direction. That's the head wall, and now this is the rake wall. We could see that there. That's the flashing as well, coming in multiple pieces there. So again, just like the roof shingles, overlapping each other so that they shed water away. Up at the ridge, so here's a section cut through the ridge. There's our ridge beam. There are rafters peeking through right there, tying into the ridge. Here's the rafter in green. And what this ridge vent does, it allows airflow to come up and out, essentially, so that we don't overheat our attics. So it lets attics breathe. So obviously, if this was a conditioned space, if the attic was a conditioned space, meaning it's heated or air conditioned, you would not have a ridge vent up there. But if it's a just a hot attic that is unfinished and not used for anything other than perhaps storage, you want them to breathe. And if I just go backwards a little bit, all the way back, I guess. So the ridge vent is up here at the top, and then you would also have soffit vents. So air would be allowed to come in through the soffit and make its way up and exhaust through the ridge vent. So that is the purpose of that, to allow air movement in the attic. All right, how to do takeoffs for roofs, roof shingles in particular. So here's our roof shingle, about 36 by 12 inches. These are the tabs. So this is a 3-tab shingle. They also come in 4 tabs, and the nails come in just above the tabs. So they are either 12 or 15 inches deep, 36 inches long. The exposure, the amount of shingle exposed to the weather, is generally between 4 to 5 inches. So that's an important phrase, exposure, when it comes to roofing components. So the next shingle will come and just cover, it'll just cover this, the very top of that slot right there. And the exposure is what remains revealed to the weather. So this here we could see is the exposure. That's the exposed part of the shingle, as opposed to up here where the words nails and 3-tab is, that part is covered by the shingle above it. So the exposure is what actually is exposed to the weather. We don't really need to determine or know that exposure when we're doing takeoffs for shingles, but we do need to when we do underlayment, and we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, so shingles are bundled that contain 20, 25, or 33.3 square feet of roof area. So this is how we do our calculations. So it's most common, it's 33.3 square feet per bundle. So that means that 3 bundles at 33.3 equals 100 square feet. So and 100 square feet in roofing lingo or terminology is 1 square. So we describe a roof in terms of how many squares of shingles there are. So 1 square equals 3 bundles. So if we had a roof with 10 squares, we would multiply that 10 squares by the 3 bundles, and we'd say that there are 30 bundles. So there is some waste with roofs. Yes, when we get to the edge, we often have to cut shingles. So 5 to 8%. 8% sounds a little high. If you do a careful takeoff, I would say that's a little on the high side. Of course, shingles could be returned, but it's a bid. It's most often a competitive bid. So adding excessive waste is not recommended for that reason. You want to keep your numbers down and as tight as possible. Okay, so that is the roof takeoff, and we'll get back and do an example and talk more about squares. Okay, nails, very important. So again, this is kind of a rule of thumb just based on squares. So roughly figuring about 400 nails or staples per square. So a box of 3,200 nails will cover 8 squares. A box of 7,200 would cover 18 squares. So for our stage where we're just beginning our estimates, we would just stick with this. We wouldn't have to get any more detailed than that. The detail being how many nails per coil, etc., how many nails per shingle exactly. That's more than we need. We do also have to calculate what they call button caps right there with that big green head. That's called a button cap, and that's used for underlayment. So that helps to prevent ripping. It has a nice wide head to hold down the paper. And these are roofing nails, which come in a roll, and then they go into a pneumatic gun in a roll fashion, and they discharge from the roll. All right, here's another system. So ice and snow. So let's just take a quick look at our hole. So again, here's the field in the middle as opposed to the perimeter. So these are using some different terms like leak barrier. So I guess this is kind of a strange drawing, but I guess we're here in a valley, and that's so again the snow and rain, the self-adhesive is put in the valley. It's also put here on the hip, not a bad practice. These are all kind of manufacturers' names for different things. There's our starter shingles down at the bottom. Okay, so ice and snow coming in. So this is the example of what I said, that we could often have ice dams down at the bottom. This doesn't even show it happening in a gutter, actually. But another reason that would occur here is that this attic might not be heated, and the soffit definitely is not heated. So this is a very cold area, and that's where ice could pond, water, and then it could get into the soffit and do damage at the top of the wall, show up in a living space down below. So that's why we have our ice barrier. So one roll is 3 feet tall by 33.3 feet long. So that handles 100 square feet. 3 times 33 is 100 square feet. So that's 1 square. Install lengths of the eaves and the valleys and the hips. So they were very generous with this example here and put it in all the eaves and the hips as well. And then they have to overlap. When you finish a roll in the field, then the next piece has to overlap it. Okay, so to determine either the it is a different dimension. So talking about the felt paper, which is here in the field. So 1 roll of felt paper. They come in different sizes, so you have to determine. This is just an example. If you're buying 150 foot long roll, and they're all 3 feet tall, you have 450 square feet in that roll. Install rake to rake above the bottom course of ice and snow. So install rake to rake. So we don't have rakes here, but it's saying that it runs out all the way because this is a hip roof. That's why there are no rakes. So here's a rake here. So we would install that paper from rake to valley. If it were a simple gable roof without all these hips, it would be rake to rake, one side of the roof to the other. They overlap 6 inches from one piece to the next, and they overlap 2 inches at the top. All right, so this overlapping is what requires discussion of the exposure. So I'm just going to go back and find one more example. Did I already? Just want to look at this one more time. Not there. Here. So we have one piece, and there's the second piece, and here comes the third. So here's the rake. So that's what I mean when we say we roll it from rake to rake. And this is at least a 2-inch overlap. So typically the architect would specify that if there's an architect on the job. Or roofers have their own practices if it's just re-roofing and no architects involved, which happens more often than not. So that is the overlap, and then the exposure is what remains, and that's what is right there. So when we do this, so the big point being that this roll may be 450 square feet. However, once we start overlapping them, the exposure is what we really need to calculate, because we're not getting all 450 square feet. We're actually using less of it. I mean, it's there, but we can't calculate it because we're not laying these edge to edge. So we can't use that 450 square foot number, is my point. So roll coverage, square feet in the roll times the exposure. So if we have 450 square feet, and then here is the width, here's the exposure divided by the width. So the width of the roll is 36 inches, but the exposure is only 34. So when you divide that, you will get a number that is smaller than 1, and when you multiply it by the 450, it's going to reduce that 450 down to 425. So when you're calculating how much you need, you use this number, which is the exposure, as opposed to the actual. So then how many rolls are required? We get our entire roof area, and we divide it by that 425. This is an important point as well. So for a very low sloped roof, 3 and 12 and 4 and 12, let me just go back to our original here. So low shingles typically only begin at 312. If you have a 112 or a 212 roof, you would not use shingles. They are too vulnerable. Water and snow would water would not just simply run off of them. So this is one slope of 112 and 212 is considered a low slope roof, or a flat roof, as opposed to the pitched roofs that we're discussing. So what this is saying is that shingles start at 312, and if you're doing something as low as 312 or 412, then you want to double that initial, or no, not just initial, you want to double all of the layers of felt paper, actually, if it's that low. So it's saying use 2 layers of 15-pound felt. There are different pounds. There's 15-pound, 30-pound. So 15-pound is on the cheaper side. I would probably, if it were my house, I would get a 30-pound, something heavier, and 30 pounds also safer for roofers to walk on. 15-pound felt is much more prone to rip, and that could result in a fall, of course. So 30-pound felt paper is preferred, I would say. And double it up if it's a low-sloped roof. If your slope is greater than 4 and 12, then 1 layer would suffice. Okay. All right. We'll look at just some materials. So these prices are circa 2019 or so. So, you always, when you're doing your cost estimates, you obviously need new, most recent prices. But this is just for reference. So shingle starter strips, 33 feet. So we're definitely paying a premium, upwards of $100 for this roll. So this is a nice continuous roll as opposed to piecing cut shingles together for that purpose. Drip edge coming in 10-foot increments, so not very expensive, $6 and change at the time. Ice and water shield, 75 feet by 36 inches. It is a lot more expensive than tar paper at $170 a roll. Shingles vary. They come in different qualities, of course. You know, in general, if you want your roof to last longer and your house to be protected, you would buy a heavy-duty architectural grade shingle as opposed to something. And they're also described in terms of 20-year shingles, 30-year shingles. So this is just one example, and these prices could vary a lot. Roofing nails, so 7,200 nails for $40. Ridge vents, 4-foot lengths, 10 pieces, a bundle of 10 pieces for $150. So you need to determine the length of your ridge, of course. And roof paper, much cheaper, a fraction of the price than, well, this actually says 90 pound. That's very heavy. 36 by 150 feet, much cheaper than the ice and snow product. Here's boots for penetrations, inexpensive. And valley flashing inside the valley there. That's $23 a piece. That's a little pricey. This roof cement we would not need. We have not looked at that. I don't recall exactly why that's here. Not in the pitched roofs typically. More for repairs of flat roofs. And then here are the button heads, $250. So that's for nailing down the underlayment. Okay, let's look at an example. Okay, for this example, I'm just going to create a very basic roof. Just sketch something out very quickly here. So let's say that this is the roof plan. That's the ridge, and then I'm not going to draw them all, but dashed lines underneath indicate where the walls are underneath. So that's showing the overhang. So these dashed lines would connect, and that indicates the building below the roof. So this slopes down in that direction, and that slopes down in that direction. And if we look at it from this side, it looks, that's our rake. And there's our, so let's just say that this is 24 feet long, and then there's a 6-inch overhang on each side, and then there's a ridge beam in there that's 1.5 inches wide. Okay, I think that's all we need to get started. Oh, we need a length in this direction, so let's make it 2 squares, 50 feet. Okay, so what I did was I just Googled rafter length calculator, and then we also need a pitch. So let's call it a 912. So for every 12 inches of run, it rises 9 inches. Okay, and then all I did was Google rafter length calculator. Rafter length calculator, and there are numerous ones out there, and this looks like the chart that we just saw. And then here we will put in our so what they're trying to determine is the length of the rafter, but that's also what we need. So we were given this 24, so we know that this is 12, but we don't know what this rafter, its true length is. So we have to take this 12 plus this 912 and determine that. So the building width we'll put in 24 feet. The beam width is the ridge, which is 1.5. So that's right there, and the rafters sit on it, so that's why that's being taken away, deducted. The overhang is 6 inches, and the pitch is 912. And that tells us that our overall rafter length is, I'm going to cut out the fractions and just call it 15.6. Overall, so that's that's including the overhang. That's exactly what we need. It includes the overhang because there are shingles down there. The ridge to wall length is 1411, so that's just not including the ridge to wall length. I'm not exactly sure where wall length. I would read that as the outside of the wall, I would think. But we don't. It doesn't really matter for us, for our purposes right now. So 15/6 is the answer to our question. I'm going to cut out the fractions just to make life a little easier. 15/6. That is that length. So if we take this 12 feet and we rotate it up so that it's at this pitch, and 912 is actually pretty steep. I didn't draw that too well. It's maybe not that steep, but it's probably a little steeper than I drew it. Okay, so what do we do with this information now? We have that, so that is this dimension right there. So I'm going to call it 15.5 feet, and then in this direction we have 50. So 15.5 feet times 50 feet. Let's get out our calculator. $15.5 times 50 equals 775 square feet. Times 2 for a grand total of, I should be able to do that math, but let's just do it here, 1550. So that is the square footage of our roof. If we go back to our presentation briefly, which I closed, so I'm not going to go back to it, we determined that 100 square feet equals a square. So let's take that 1550, divide it by 100, and we get 15.5 squares. There are 3 bundles per square. Let's take out the calculator there quickly. 15.5 squares at 3 bundles each is 46.5 bundles. So we have to get 47 bundles of shingles. And if we wanted to do 5% waste, we would multiply that by 1.05, and we're up to, so 49 with waste. So 49 bundles with waste. Okay, and that's how that's determined. So a little, excuse my messy handwriting, but I hope that communicates the idea. Let's go back. Let me pause for one moment. Okay, just opened up the presentation. So that is our roofing. We determined that. Our nail coverage, 400 nails per square. So if we have 15.5 times 400, $15.5 squares times 400 nails is 6,200 nails are needed. So depending on how they sell them, you might buy more than one box or just one. Depends how they sell them, of course. And back to the presentation. Let's take a look at so the ice and snow is, well, that's not really determined the same exact way. So if we wanted to do ice and snow, for instance, this is the number that we care about. They are 33 feet long. And that would go here and here. And that works out to 100 linear feet. So 3 of them would be cutting it very close. That might work. Okay, so that's what that would be. I'm going to just get rid of all of this actually now quickly. Okay, and let's do the roof paper, the tar paper. felt. Sometimes it's called felt paper or tar paper. It's like, because it is like tar on the felt, actually. So again, we care about this number. So it's not the 450. So again, if we're purchasing rolls that are 150, let me do one quick calculation here. Let me adjust my pieces a little bit here. I'll just do one calculation. Let's pretend that we're getting rolls that are 200 linear feet. So we would come here. So square feet in the roll. So if that was 200 and they are 3 feet tall, so that would be 600. So 600 square feet right there. And then the exposure divided by the width. So it's multiplied. The width is 36 and the exposure. So here it's just a 2-inch overlap. So let's pretend like I wanted it to be a 4-inch overlap. So then the exposure would be 32 with a 4-inch overlap. So all these numbers are adjusted according to what you purchase and the overlap that you want. So 32 divided by 36 will give us a smaller number, 0.88. Multiply that by the 600, and we have to pretend like we actually only get 533 square feet out of the 600 square foot roll due to the overlaps. Okay. If we got the ice and if we got the ice and water, we would also have to subtract that bottom row, which I'm not doing here. So I'm just going to treat this like, so actually I got rid of our calculations. I think we determined that it was about 15.5 squares. Let me just bring back my calculator quickly. So we said it was 1,550 square feet, and one roll is getting us 500. So 3 of these will, let's divide and just be certain here. Whoops, that was a mistake. 1,550 square feet is the roof, divided by the 533 per roll, and so 3 rolls should do it for this. Okay, that's the big pieces. I hope that was helpful, and thank you. Okay, as an example, I am